Because of the free speech of our enemies, you're being guided to a choice where you have to choose between ostracism and the long-term health of your family and nation. That's the choice that you have to make. And the enemies of our country are using free speech to bring it to a head like this. Our enemies make as many Christian concepts seem offensive as they possibly can. I'm against the idea that you don't know that you have to filter other people's free speech. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jamal. This video is about how the enemies of America are using free speech to destroy America. Okay, now you think of free speech and you think, okay, freedom, doing what I want to do, not being blocked by anything in my path to what I want. You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are endowed by their created right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So as you're pursuing happiness, what do you need? You need liberty. You certainly don't need people getting in your way. You don't need obstacles of any kind in your way. It's a relationship between me and a goal, and I don't want to have something in between. Okay, so now freedom ends where my pursuit crosses paths with your pursuit, and then I have to negotiate with you, because if I want to feel free to kill and you want to feel free to live, then we have conflict, right? So freedom is not completely free. Murder is the extreme conflict of two people on two different paths, two divergent paths. But why do people do whatever they do? They're doing it to be happy. And many times paths start out with the hint of happiness. And so even if you haven't reached your goal, let's say you've never made that $1 million, or you've never been with a girl that everybody calls a 10, right? Or you've never been with you've never dated a guy that looks like, I don't know, Rob Lowe, or I'm not a girl, so I'm not even gonna go there. But so why would you pursue it? You pursue it on the hint that it's gonna bring you joy. And here's where we start to get into how free speech is used against America. The enemies of America realize that America is too lush, it's too rich, it's indomitable. It's they can't beat America.
Antonio Gramsci realized that if you can take over the institutions in a culture, you will be able to use those to influence society to create the socialist man you want. I think the most brilliant part of his plan was that he realized you could not only create a man that wanted big government to take care of him cradle to grave, but, and this is the genius of Gramsci, you could create a man that needed big government to take care of him cradle to grave.
The Frankfurt School developed the concept of cultural Marxism.
Penetrate the culture, take it over, and then everything else will follow.
And of course they did that, and today we've had a complete cultural revolution. As many people in America are familiar with the phrase "make love, not war," that actually came from Herbert Marcuse, who was with the Frankfurt School. So these guys went after education, they went after media, and they've been very successful in changing the entire worldview of Americans through what they call political correctness, but it's really cultural Marxism, with the goal being to destroy Christianity, then create chaos, and then move to their ultimate goal, which is from cultural Marxism to traditional Marxism, which is socialism.
Most of the strategy to remake America from within started with Antonio Gramsci, who wrote over 2,000 pages back in the 1930s outlining how to take a Judeo-Christian culture down from the inside. The plan he suggested has been the main focus of the left ever since.
Antonio Gramsci was a neo-Marxist philosopher.
Antonio Gramsci was an Italian communist.
Antonio Gramsci is probably the biggest troublemaker in the world. He's probably got more responsibility for our social ills than anybody else on the planet.
He knew of the importance of undermining the morals and the character of this country.
Because America had a strong Christian heritage, you had to attack the culture. You had to change the culture.
Even to pornography, into areas that most people normally wouldn't accept.
He said that we're going to destroy the West by destroying its culture. We're going to infiltrate and we're going to turn their music, their art, and their literature against them.
That means that you penetrate the universities, you write the books, the novels, the poetry, the music, the book reviews. And once you control the culture, then you can sort of shape the thought of rising generations.
He differed with Marx. Instead of, for example, destroying the church and the other basic institutions, he said infiltrate them and use them to change the culture.
What Gramsci had to say was that this is the way that government is perpetuated and society is perpetuated is through these churches, because they set the standards, they set the framework of the way people live, of rules, how a family should be structured.
He didn't want a revolution on the streets that would be overturned by the police the next day. He wanted to change society over the long term so that we'd have a revolution without us even realizing it, basically.
After reviewing all of the strengths of America, they came up with a theory that would work even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that is to infiltrate America. And one of the main ways that they're actually bringing about the end of their enemy, America, is through massive brainwashing, okay? In other words, we're going to flood your culture with bad suggestions about what leads to joy, okay? Human beings are always picking up suggestions about what leads to joy, setting goals based on that, and then pursuing it, right? So if you have freedom to pursue your happiness, their strategy is to make us choke on it. And by choke on it means like we get what we want, but what we want has poison in it. In other words, there are certain behaviors that they bring about joy. There are certain pursuits that do result in joy, but there's two types of joy. There's true joy, right? And then there's sort of like this trick joy. It's an example of an untrue joy is drugs. Drugs make you feel good. People do drugs because drugs make you feel good. But it's not true, because in the long run, drugs don't add to your life. They detract from your life, okay? They break marriages, they break families, okay? They kill you, early death. Okay, obviously, they make people feel good. Most people wouldn't do it. And then after you do it, you feel like, wow, I didn't get a natural high from a victory in my life. I got this fake high, which made me feel victorious, but I know I didn't do anything, so I'm a piece of crap now, and now I got to go get some more drugs because the drugs understand my situation, and I can't tell people how weak and lame I am. So, you know, it's a cycle. And, you know, our enemies know that there are true joys and there are false joys. There are joys that are going to add to our life in the long run, add to our descendants. We'll have something positive to bequeath to our descendants if we have a true pursuit to a true joy. What's the formula of the false joy? Well, the false joy usually appeals to the body, or what people say is the base senses, right? In other words, things that a kid can readily understand. You don't have to be a sophisticated thinker to understand food and warmth and shelter and sexual stimulation, okay? Or physical stimulation of any kind is a base desire. It's not a lofty desire like composing a symphony or trying to land on one of the moons of Jupiter or something like that. It doesn't require a long slog through various sciences in order to get what you want. It's just ready, and your body is totally on board with it. Your cells, your nerves are totally on board with this stimulant, and that's why we call it a base desire. And you don't need to be intelligent to enjoy a base desire. So the base the base desires, when we have them to excess, push out higher desires, or push out the time that we spend on higher desires. That is what our enemies wanted. Our enemies wanted us to pursue base desires. In strategizing against us, they saw, what is it that, goes against the base desires within American culture? So basically, Christianity and family. Okay, in other words, as your clan or your people, your family line, your family tradition has been building best practices, and in those best practices, the best way to pursue joy, make money, have health, in the long run. In other words, true joy, pursue true joys. Your family has these best practices. They bequeath to you these best practices, and your family, even after you pass away, remains strong. So family is going to get in the way of these strategists, because strong families tend to neutralize the whole base desires internal conversation in the minds of the family members, right? That's a good family, and good families are now the enemy of America's enemies. I hope you catch that, right? Also, what else elevates people's thinking away from base desires? The church has worked to elevate people's thinking above base desires. Something else. What else elevates people's thinking above base desires? Traditionalism in the United States itself. In other words, our relationship with the founding fathers, our emotional or psychological relationship with the way that they saw the way the country should be, causes us to move away from base desires and have loftier desires for our nation. So the communist strategist, what he has to do is, through free speech, make it plausible or make it look enjoyable to detract from your own family, to detract from the relationship with the founding principles of the country in the first place, to detract from your relationship with Christianity. They don't mind us having religions that are actually disrespectful to human beings, like Islam. Islam basically talks to you as if you're a servant of God when you're made to be a child of God. And communists don't care about religions at all. But if they could look at the two religions, they would rather you side with Islam, because Islam would have you think of yourself as a servant rather than a child. And so, the servant does not have any hope of inheriting certain things because he's the servant, but the child does inherit. So there's a hope there for a true joy to come. And anyway, so Christianity is the main enemy, making us so vibrant that we were out of reach from our enemies. So they have to make it plausible for us to be anti-family, anti-Christian, and anti-founding fathers. So they corrupted our education system to make us feel, that the founding of this nation was somehow stupid. And they are doing a full court press now because they have invaded the institutions that influence the minds of America. You got Hollywood being anti-American. You've got the education system being anti-American, anti-Christian. You've got pop culture, music being anti-family, okay? Anti-parents. When you had Al Bundy sitting on the couch, a total, waste of a father imagery. And now, how many TV shows can you see where a father is a dominant figure in the house? He's not allowed to be a dominant figure in the house. And you think that's by accident? No, you think that women and children could rise up against men all by themselves? No. You have the aggressive influence ridiculing the idea that men are a dominant force in the house. That influence is coming from the outside. It's coming on purpose. And I'm saying to you like this. The people that produce media, when they have a choice to bankroll let's say, two different scripts. And in one script, the father is seen as a very important dominant figure in the house. And in another script, he's dwarfed in his skill set by his female counterpart. He's ridiculed. They will choose to bankroll the second. They will actually have something against the first because it doesn't serve their purposes. They're trying to brainwash an entire nation. They are using free speech to do this. Now, you would say, all right, the bottom line, the end of the math is our enemies are getting us to look at bad joy or false joy as if it's extremely plausible, and true joy, which comes through Christian culture, pro-family culture, and adherence to what our founding fathers gave us, they're ridiculing that. They're making it look like it's not socially viable, like you'll be ridiculed for following that. Why is it so aggressively against all the sources of traditional true goodness, true joy leading to true good outcomes? Why? Because our enemies are doing it on purpose, but they have to make it plausible. They make your base desires seem more plausible and your lofty desires seem more ridiculous. So, am I against free speech? No. I'm against the idea that you don't know that you have to filter other people's free speech. That's the first thing I'm saying. If you don't know that we're under attack like this, you will not be filtering what's being said to you. You're not filtering the free speech of other people. And does that mean that you have to reject a lot of what's coming out in Hollywood? Yeah, you do. You have to put yourself on a diet. You have to be on like a media fast. Okay, because if somebody's putting poisons in the food around you and you're not discriminating which foods have poison from which foods don't, you're dead. You're dead. And same will be said for our nation. And so if you're not discriminating between what you're eating, because media carries with it all these suggestions about what's going to result in happiness. You know, and so if you're eating all those suggestions, you're going to be pursuing all those things. And if, you know, you're pursuing base desires and you're getting high fives for it in society, but it kills you, you know, maybe you shouldn't have watched the media or consumed the media that kept suggesting that that base desire was as viable as they made it look. You know what I'm saying? Beyond that, they know that you would have a filter. So guess what they do? They created what's called political correctness. Now, political correctness is, okay, you're offending me when you say that single-parent families are not as good as double-parent families or two-parent families, right, or traditional family. You're offending me because I work hard as a single mom, right? And so political correctness usually starts with a complaint that somebody's offended, right? Now, being offended is not an absolute. It's arbitrary. It's in the eye of the beholder, right? So we're taking these arbitrary standards and we're sort of like normalizing them. So we assume that talking against single-parent families is, you know, totally not doable. When the truth is, the outcomes from single-parent families is nowhere near, in terms of goodness and good outcomes and beneficial outcomes, nowhere near the traditional family. But we're not allowed to do that because we're not allowed to say anything that certain people will say hurts them. Here's what you're doing. You're trading this social joy, not being seen as a mean person, for true lasting joy of having a healthy society. In other words, here's the nuclear family which bequeaths to you and your future generations healthy society, right? And here's political correctness which promises you that you'll be socially, you know, accepted as a non-mean person, you know, or as a nice person. So you're being made to trade or choose because of the free speech of our enemies. You're being guided to a choice where you have to choose between ostracism and the long-term health of your family and nation. That's the choice that you have to make. And the enemies of our country are using free speech to bring it to a head like this. You could think of some situations where our desire to be accepted socially is pitted against our desire to truly flourish like in a real way, like you can pass those benefits on to your kids kind of way, you know. If people like me today, that's a short term. They like me, nobody's seeing me as a bigot, homophobe, racist, and all these ostracizing terms. I'm escaping these labels, yes, but guess what I gotta do? I gotta not offend people. So our enemies make as many Christian concepts seem offensive as they possibly can, to the point where they have dressed Christianity in bigotry. Christianity isn't about bigotry, but from the outside now, Christianity is wearing these clothes that it did not put on itself, and it's clothed in bigotry, homophobia. It's actually very abusive. If Christianity was a person, that person would say, get these freaking clothes off me. It's as if Christianity is being abused by someone who keeps putting clothes on it that it did not choose to put on. Okay, so all of this is happening very subtly, and that is how our enemies are using free speech against us. So to put it in a short way, this is one tool I'm using. I'm using free speech, misinforming your population on purpose, suggesting that certain paths are enjoyable, and if you're ridiculing those paths, I'm somehow framing it so that you look like the intolerant fool. And all of this is done within free speech. So, and you need a filter, and the only places that suggest you to have a filter, such as Christianity and family, I'm dismantling those on purpose, so that the only way for you to have peace in the environment that I'm actively generating is for you to be a person of base desires. And when you're a person of base desires, I can come in and take over your country, which was the original purpose back in the 70s and 80s of the communists in the first place, because they couldn't beat us militarily. They could only dismantle us from within. That is how free speech is being used against you. You need to have a filter, and you need to not give a damn about what people are going to call you. And that is why Donald Trump is doing so well. Because he's actually doing that. He's actually acting like, I don't give a damn. I'm going to call it straight, and I don't care what you say about it. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. Talk to you later. Bye.